because often there's a disconnect between corporate and the people who are showing up and doing the work every single day.
We like to have our employees greeting every customer, talking to them, making that connection, which I think is what people are looking for when they're going into a full service restaurant.
And I'm like, how is that possible? Are people really just trying to be that efficient and timely in and out? But don't we lose the smile and the brand that All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. On this podcast, we talk about the heart and hustle necessary for success in business and in life. And today I'm bringing you a brand new episode of our HR Heroes series. I've got Jessica Pike with me, who is a human resources director at Grill Concepts and a former human resources coordinator at North Thurston Public Schools. Jessica, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Man, so we have so much to talk about today. One of the things that we connected on early when we first met was the lack of the human element inside of HR. Now, you're going to bring some unique, I would say, concepts and ideas to the conversation because you're in the restaurant space. And so why don't you give everybody a little background about you yourself, how you got into HR, and specifically an overview of what you guys do at Grill Concepts.
Okay. I have been working in HR for about 9 years. It was something I was always a little interested in and just, wasn't sure where to start. So I ended up working in human resources with North Thurston Public Schools. I was with the company for 13 years before I moved to Las Vegas about 2 years ago and started with Grill Concepts as their HR director. It's been very different going from public schools into the restaurant industry, but it's been interesting. I like it. I like the change. And with our restaurants, we have 9 locations across 4 different states, the majority in California. We have one here in Summerlin, Public School 702. So that's our only one local in Vegas.
Well, one of the things that I would like to learn a little bit more about was you came from the school space, right? You're now in the restaurant space. What are some of the similarities or some of the, I would say, lessons learned that you pulled over from your previous experience into this space?
I think no matter what industry you work in, if you're in human resources is going to be the same everywhere you go. You're still taking care of your employees. You're still thinking about, is this good for our employees? Is this good for the company? So I think with that, you can take human resources and go into any industry. It's just learning that industry once you get into it. But all the same things are still what's happening. You're still talking to employees. You're still taking care of them, benefits, assisting people is going to be the same in any industry.
I think there's a real human element that is super important when we come to going to a restaurant, right? It's all about service. It's all about the smile. It's all about the experience. And one of the things that we connected on that I want to riff on really quick is the use of automation and technology when it comes to the point of service, right? We see a lot of organizations like McDonald's as an example. I've seen a lot in the last couple of years of them going to a employee-less restaurant location. And I'm like, how is that possible? Are people really just trying to be that efficient and timely in and out? But don't we lose the smile and the brand that's made so much behind McDonald's in the first place? What's your kind of opinion on the automation stuff?
I guess for fast food, if people are in a hurry, I guess it makes sense, but all of our locations are full service. So they're going there because they want the experience of going and sitting down at a table and talking with their friends or their family and, ordering their food that way. So I think going automated in that situation isn't really the best way to go. We like to have our employees greeting every customer, talking to them, making that connection, which I think is what people are looking for when they're going into a full service restaurant.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that I've really appreciated in our brief time knowing each other was some of the, I would say, creative initiatives that you've launched to be able to create better culture within your organization. So what are some of the things that you could kind of put on the idea board, if you will, for other HR leaders who are looking to build that camaraderie? And one of the things we talked about before was that healthy sense of competition. So I hope you use the example that I'm thinking about.
I think some of the things that I have implemented since I've been there, we didn't have an employee assistance program, which to me, coming from the school district, very different. Like that was just very common to me. So when I saw that we didn't have it, I'm like, oh, we need to get that with our next enrollment, because it's free for our employees, and they provide so many services, and our employees, a lot of them didn't even know that it was available. And so the fact that we could bring that in and get that out there to everybody and have people actually use it has been really important to me. I think a lot of people just don't know, and if you don't know that it's available to you, so I try to get the word out on that. We also implemented Tapcheck, which is, it's basically you work today, you get paid tomorrow. So you sign up through an app, you can get your money the next day. So if you worked the day before, the next day you can get your funds. So I think that's something that's really helped our employees, because it just takes the pressure off of, what if you have a bill due and payday's not for a week, and then that stress on the employees, and that's affecting them. So giving them that choice, hey, oh, I can pull this money out that I already earned and pay this bill, and now I don't have to worry about it.
One of the things that I really love is the whole person view of wellness. And so I was doing a little bit of research on Tapcheck. They were talking about they are employee financial wellness. And if you think about the stresses, right, that come along with money, you need to be able to get your money as quickly as possible after you've worked. And so implementing simple technology like that, I think, is just absolutely amazing, because it creates so many efficiencies, but also makes the employee feel so much more supported.
Yes.
Is that kind of what you've experienced too?
Yeah, I think so, because, a lot of people are waiting for that check, to pay rent, to pay a car payment, anything, something like your child's daycare, any of those things. People are like, oh, okay, I need to line up my paydays. Well, we're paid bi-weekly. Those days are different every month. So it's hard to predict all the time exactly what day is payday. It's not the first every single month.
Right.
It varies. So I think just giving people that opportunity.
Yeah, it's a great step forward towards making, I would say, your employees feel recognized and validated for the work that they go through, and they do, but not having to go through those times of uncertainty, right? Yeah. Which is so important. Yeah. So one of the examples that I was hoping you were going to bring up here when I talked about healthy competition was your ice cream competition as well. So give everybody some insights about that.
So last year on Employee Appreciation Day, I was kind of trying to brainstorm some ideas of what we could do for our employees. Since we are spread out, we're not all in one location. It's not that like we could all get together and do something together as a company. At that time, there were about 500 employees. So obviously we couldn't get together. So what we did is each location was given an allowance to go out and buy supplies for a party. They were all given, this is the day we're doing it. Pick whatever time works best for your location. And whoever can have the best ice cream bar, like with the best toppings, the best setup, the most creative ice cream sundae, however whatever the best is. So come up with the most creative ideas you can, the coolest decorations, whatever. So we put that out and said, send us your pictures. We want to see, that your employees came and got to enjoy this. And also then we can see who's winning, like what's the competition. So it really got people like more involved, even from afar, where they could all go and say like, oh, okay, this is what I did. And they were sending in their pictures. And then we got like a group call together where we just said thank you to everybody, and got that out from like our corporate office staff. Yeah. And I think people had fun with it. I mean, our managers that were organizing it had fun with it. And they said that the employees appreciated it, even though, it wasn't something huge, but it was just fun.
I think that's like such a fundamental element of like a positive work environment, right? I mean, everything when you come into work often, I know some of the biggest challenges that people face when they work in the restaurant industry specifically is like work is so fast paced and it's so high pressure. And I'm dealing with so many different personalities, from what's going on in the back of the house and what's going on in the front of the house, the individual customers who I'm dealing with as well. So creating a positive, fun experience for people, I think is a great leadership style, because everybody wants to do something fun, but they often don't correlate those two things with work, right?
Right. Yeah. And like you said, it's so busy that there's really not a lot of downtime when you're in a restaurant.
Yeah. One of the things that we talk about, just from our business perspective at Francis, is like mental wellness isn't supposed to be something that's scary. And a lot of people deal with struggles from an internal stigma that we have about like, I can't access therapy, I can't talk to a therapist or a counselor. And so we've always tried to just make the experience of mental wellness as fun and as positive and as lighthearted as possible, because we recognize that people have ideas right in their mind about what things are, but sometimes it's leaders like you and organizations like ours who try and rewrite that landscape, right, to change the perspective.
Right.
So one of the things that I want to talk about next is, on our previous conversation, we talked about where a lot of industry trends are going. And you mentioned something that was really important to me. You said organizations today, because of either turnover rates or, people who are dropping out of the organization, they're trying to get the most out of their employees possible. So where do you think the balance of that most out of them possible, and also I would say maintaining their well-being, kind of comes in from your perspective?
Yeah. We've experienced this a little bit in our company where our corporate office has dropped dramatically in how many people we have, just due to the fact that some of our locations have closed. And, we just have to think about the business costs. If we're closing a restaurant and we have employees losing their jobs, like, that's hard for me already. I feel bad. And, I hate to see that happen. But we also want them to see that it's not just them, like, it's the company as a whole, and we're all, taking on more with less people. And I think that kind of shows, okay, well, corporate is now, I think many, many years ago, they said it was like 50 people or something. It was
Wow.
before I worked there. When I started, we were at about 14, and now we're at 7.
Okay.
So, those of us that are still there are taking on a lot more. But we also know, okay, well, we're taking on more because we're also expecting our locations to take on more. So our general managers are taking on more, our kitchen managers are taking on more. So we're just kind of, at this point, trying to find ways to show appreciation to the people who are doing that. So we've been kind of talking about some different ideas, nothing set in stone yet, but finding some different perks for those people who are doing that, just to show that we see it, we appreciate it, and we want to give you something, to feel that appreciation.
Yeah, seen and validated, right? I think one of the biggest things that I recognize is often there's a disconnect between corporate and the people who are showing up and doing the work every single day. But often the person who's put in the middle of those two people is HR, to be the one who communicates policy updates and stuff like that. So how do you guys communicate as an organization that everybody's taking on more work these days, and it's not just being kind of passed down the ladder to the people who are showing up on the front lines?
We do have meetings with our general managers, our kitchen managers. So as far as like our corporate office staff, which I'm part of, but we're all separate, if that makes sense, since we're all remote. But they try to connect with all the general managers like, hey, this is what's happening over here. We call it the RSC, the Restaurant Support Center, rather than corporate. So we got on a call at that time and said, hey, just to let you guys know, we made cuts here at the RSC. We are down employees. We're going to be remote because we're trying to save money by not being in a building, paying rent. We're doing this too. So we made sure that they knew what was going on. And also with the change, because if they're reaching out to someone and they're like, what happened to so-and-so? We wanted them to not be shocked. And so the fact, I think, that they saw that and that we were really transparent about it, I think made it a little easier. It kind of made some of them like, thinking, oh no, like that panic feeling, which we all felt. Myself included. I thought, oh no, like, who's next?
Yeah.
And it's scary. And so we wanted to assure everybody, like, we are still here for you. Even though we're not in the office, technically, we're always in the office. You can call us, you can email us, whatever you need.
One of the things that I know, the transition of working remotely is challenging, right? Especially if you've come from an organization that has historically been in a building, the restaurant support center, right? Or corporate, whatever you want to call it. How have you been able to manage your well-being now that you're working in a fully remote environment? Because creating that disconnection, those boundaries can be really tough. So what are you doing personally?
Well, I've had experience working remotely before, so that was good. When I worked for the school district, we were remote for a while due to COVID, and just transitioning back, I was remote. And that one was where I kind of learned how to separate home from work, because it is hard. When you're working, it's hard to separate that. So I struggled with it in the beginning during COVID of when do I know when to stop working? Like, when do I stop? When do I shut it down and walk away? And I figured that out. So now this time it was much smoother. My office is separate. So when I leave at the end of my day and walk into the other room, I close the door, I turn the lights off. I'm like, I'm not going back in there.
Yeah.
That's how I try to separate it.
That's been one of my biggest struggles. We're sitting in the Heart and Hustle podcast studio, which is also my office. And I feel like this is a siren in my life because it's always calling for me. I've always got something to do in this space. But you're right. Being able to close the door and turn the lights off at nighttime and saying, okay, now I'm home is really important. One of my mentors actually just talked to me about a symbolic gesture to recognize that the day has ended. And so what he did, and that's outside in the garage, I can show you a little bit later. I have a brush out there. And so when I end my day and I go to the gym as an example, that's like my end of day activity, I brush off the day's work. And he was like, that little symbolic gesture gives your brain the idea that like you're wiping it off and it's time to leave it behind. Very similar to how you would brush off your shoes. Okay. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before, but I've been implementing it, and it's actually been a good like mental barrier that's kind of reinforced, my mindset.
Yeah, I think mine is just my dog sits next to me in the office, and so when I'm done for the day, I'm like, okay, we're done, let's go. And she gets up and she leaves, and I'm like, okay, that's our sign. Like, close the door, we're not going back in.
She's like, yes, Mom, thank you. Now it's time for you to play with me.
So I think, even just that little thing where I'm like, okay, we're done working, let's go.
Yeah. Well, I know on our call before, you talked about being accessible as an HR leader. And I was watching a recording of our conversation, and you mentioned that you are always trying to respond to people as much as possible, even on the weekends and stuff like that. And you had talked about previous experiences where you have other friends who are leaders in HR organizations, and they have like a ticketing system where they receive a ticket from one of their employees and they try to get back to them within 10 days. Yes. And I was like, oh my goodness, that seems like such a delay.
I know.
So what is your perspective on that type of culture?
I understand that large companies do it. I guess they have to. I don't know. We're at about 450 employees, but we were at about 600 when I started with the company. Me being the only HR person the whole time. We did have payroll at one point in the very beginning, but then I took that over as well. I think just people want to call and they want an answer. They're calling HR because they have a question or an issue or something, and they want to talk to you right then. They don't want to talk to you in 10 days. They want to talk to you that day, like especially if they're upset.
Right.
If something went wrong and they have a problem, like we have people who call like, I went to the doctor, my benefits they said I'm not enrolled. That's urgent. They want an answer right then. They're standing at the doctor with their sick child or themselves, and they're like, why doesn't this work? So, I understand the importance of that, because if it were me calling, I would want an answer too.
Yeah, right now.
And the longer you wait, I find people get more upset. They're waiting. So that's why, I'm checking my email all the time. If I miss a call, I'm checking my voicemail and I'm calling people back. And I do check on the weekends and I do check in the evening. If it's something that, is just a minor question, yes, I probably will wait. Yeah. But I'm checking for something that's urgent.
And I think it's natural that you guys are in the customer business, right? And I think I might have mentioned this previously, and I always try and bring this in, somehow weave it in. People always ask us, are you a B2B company or are you a B2C company? And I always say we're a P2P company. We're people to people, right? And you guys serve your external customer, but your internal customer is what really makes your machine run on a daily basis. So you're almost like a customer service representative between, the restaurant support center and everything else. And so being responsive naturally is something we experience when we reach out to customer service at any other business. So why shouldn't HR respond in a timely manner to my needs? Right. Because I'm also a customer of our business.
Yeah. I've always kind of thought like I'm here to help the employees so that they can do their job. Like when I worked for the school district, I'm like, I'm here to help the teachers so the teachers can teach the students. If I don't provide them with what they need, then they can't do their job either. And if they're worrying about something or they're stressed out about something that I could fix, then that's my job, is to fix it, to make them be able to do their job.
Yeah, you're an empowerer. At the basis of your job title, right? You empower others to be their best self, and you show up for them every single day and you go to bat for them. So one of the things that you had mentioned on our call previously was You guys are a family and a small company. And that's kind of how your CEO described your business. So, what family elements do you think leadership like your CEO kind of trickles down from the top? And how do you kind of reinforce and re-embrace those type of cultural elements?
I mean, he does treat us as family, so he treats us, like when you tell your family something straight up, tell them the truth. That's what we get to,
Yeah.
which is great because I like that. Like it's transparent. There's the communication, the things that some people don't bring up at work because they don't want to cause a problem. Like we don't do that in our group because we're like, everybody has to have an opinion. We're a small group. Like we have to talk. So I think that kind of comes in there. So, I mean, of course, there's people that if you disagree or whatever, it's like family. It happens.
Yeah.
But as far as like our CEO, he is always, he cares about the employees. Like if an employee comes and says like, I'm having this problem and I need help with this, like he is compassionate and he recognizes that. And especially like our longtime employees, like he would do a lot for them.
I mean, there's just so much compassion. And when we talked originally, I shared a book, which is somewhere. It's 12 and a half by Gary Vaynerchuk, where he talks about the emotional elements of business success. And compassion is on his short list of 12 and a half ingredients, but also kind candor, right? Being candorous with our family, employees, the people we work with is so important because conflict comes up consistently. But when we avoid it, it becomes so much scarier to have to turn around and like go back to it. So I love that element as well.
Yeah, I feel like we're encouraged to speak up and say something.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you're talking to. Like we're all equals.
Really important. So here's my question for you. When it comes to, the environment that we live in, which is media, Instagram, social media, everything else that comes at us, there's a lot of negativity that kind of swirls around us constantly. How do you yourself stay positive in a world where everything seems to be going on in a negative slant?
I think I just try really hard to not take things personal. I think when I was very new in HR, I took things personal. If somebody was upset and they called me and they were mad, they were yelling, something like that, I would take it personal. And then I kind of learned, I'm like, okay, like you've got to separate that. Like they're just doing this because they're upset about something, or maybe there's something else going on with them and this is why they're making it, such a bigger deal than I might have thought it was, because maybe to them it was. And so over the years, I've just kind of learned, like, don't take it personal. They might just want to vent. And I've even had employees like that will do that and then they call back and they're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's all right. I mean, I get it, and just making sure that I kind of just take some of the things with a grain of salt. HR is there to vent to or to take complaints as well as help people. I mean, if there's a complaint, we want to fix it. So I think just trying to make sure I'm seeing it from their perspective and just not getting like emotional about it, getting my emotions in it.
That's that word perspective was what I was going to harp on. So I'm glad you brought that up. But it is a healthy sense of perspective, right? And recognizing that we're all people. Sometimes we have bad experiences through the day and we might not always communicate what we're really trying to say. There's a famous phrase. It's like, just because you say something does not mean that's what other people heard. Right. And I always try and bring that into my leadership style of trying to be as understanding and try and have that distance, right? That perspective that's necessary to understand like maybe something's going on and not having that emotional reaction, which I think is just so fundamental. So my next point of discussion is in 2023, February of this year, the Mahoney Group came out and published a study where they talked about a crisis happening from a mental health perspective in the restaurant space. And they said that, work in itself is so fast paced and often comes with long shifts with limited time off or breaks. And it also features demanding customers who we have to be able to balance as well. So what are some of the, I would say, mental health patterns that you've been able to recognize in your organization when it comes to your employees? How are they dealing with the uncertainty of everything that's going on with the landscape changing, inflation, all this kind of stuff?
It's been a little tricky. And of course, everybody handles things differently, and also maybe how they receive any information, how that's delivered to them kind of determines how they're going to be. So like if we had, for example, just something to share with all of our staff. And we said to all of our general managers, hey, you have to share this with your employees. And maybe it's something difficult. Maybe it's layoffs or, an increased cost in benefits, something that they're not going to be excited about.
Yeah.
The way that the manager presents that to them, I think, is a lot of how the team's going to respond to it. If they come in and act all negative and they're mad and they're like, this is stupid, like, why is this like this? Then their team is going to do the same thing, because that's who they're looking to for the direction. So we just kind of try to encourage them, like, try to put a positive spin on this, like, assure everybody, like, you're okay, it's going to be all right. Like, if you have questions, like, we're here for you, just to kind of, I guess, soften that a little bit. But I think a lot of it is the delivery, and how it's communicated. I think what upsets people more is not having any communication, because I've been on the other side of that too, where you don't know anything and then all of a sudden you're like blindsided by something. And
Right.
I think that's just, just being transparent, like we have been with our company, with store closures, and just being transparent with everybody. Like, this is why we're doing it, so that there's a reason. We're not just doing things randomly.
Yeah, I think the ability to communicate effectively really kind of shores up any gaps, right? Because when there's gaps in communication, it leaves room for our mind to do what it does best, to jumping to negative conclusions, and then it creates uncertainty, and then it creates doubt, and then we have to deal with all of that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. So one of the things that I often think about is, from a role of HR, you're really emphasizing how people are seen, heard, and encouraged. So when it comes to making sure that your employees are seen, other than things that you talk about with like Tapcheck and every stuff like that, what other things are you doing in the business to make sure that people recognize that they can come to you often, that there's not any barriers, that HR is not a punishment? What kind of stuff are you kind of prioritizing?
Yeah, that was something that was a little hard at first, because I think I had mentioned to you when I came into the role, there had been some other people in there for like a short time prior to me. So when I came in, I think there was kind of that, oh, she's another new person. And so it took a little time to kind of build those relationships and have people realize, like, you can call me. It's not bad. HR doesn't equal trouble. And I think that's just kind of the stigma with it, that people always think, like, even when I tell people I work in HR, they're like, oh. And I don't want to be that person that somebody is like, I don't want to talk to her because she's HR, or
So
I don't want to.
where does that come from? Do you know what I mean? Like, we talked about like kind of the cultural experiences of where that ideology has come from. Like, where's your perspective in like that bad taste people have for HR?
TV, I don't know. I remember a long time ago when I first went into HR, I was telling my son about it, and he said, nobody's going to like you. Don't you watch The Office?
Oh, wow.
And he was little, and we laughed about it, and I'm like, oh. But that is kind of what people think, or maybe before, HR was different. I mean, I think it was more you went to HR if you were in trouble for something. You see memes about it, I got sent to HR, and so I think that's just where it comes from. But I want people to know, like, you don't have to only come to me for a problem. You can come to me for a question or advice, anything really. I mean, that's what I'm there for. And I want people to not be scared to reach out. So I tried to implement that to everyone. I tell all of our managers that they don't have a problem calling, but I mean, some of our employees, it makes them nervous to think, I don't want to call HR. Nobody wants to call HR. So I'm like, put my phone number up on the employee board, my email. That way, if people need me, it's accessible. Like, it's not a secret. They can reach out.
Do you have any cadence for like check-in chats with employees when they first come on to the organization or anything like that?
I don't personally, but they do that on location.
Okay.
So they have trainers on location, and that's part of their responsibility as the trainer, is to check in with new employees and kind of report that back to management.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So I fielded some questions for today's episode, and I asked my audience on LinkedIn, plus the other couple places, like, what are some of your experiences with HR? If you had a one-on-one with your HR director or a trusted HR, I would say advocate, what would you ask them? And this is what a person said. They said, I work in a kitchen, and it can be particularly stressful with orders coming in rapidly. I have to work quickly and efficiently just to keep up. Now, this high stress environment that I've worked in is really starting to have a negative impact on my mental health. Should I approach talking to HR so I don't end up putting I would say, scarlet letter on my chest to say that I'm not capable of handling the work that's necessary?
If somebody calls me and says, I'm having these issues, like I'm stressed, that's confidential. I mean, I'm not calling their manager and telling them. That's between me and them, and that's not something I would be repeating to anybody. What I would do in that case is I would want them to call me, of course, so I could give them the resources like the employee assistance program. You get free counseling sessions. They do, like you can do in-person counseling, you can do over the phone. They have a ton of resources, like stress management and like your health and well-being. So give them all these resources. And I just let the employees know, when you call them, you call the employee assistance program, I don't even know what you say. Like that does not come back to me. So don't feel like whatever you tell them is coming back, it's between them. I don't get a report of who called. I don't get a report of what services they used. I have no idea. So I just assure them, it's confidential. It's not held against you for anything. If some people are really struggling, I ask, do they need time off? Do they need to take a leave of absence? Like, what's going on, and see what it is. Is it, they're just overwhelmed right now, or do they have like a medical issue going on or family issue? Because in those cases, there's FMLA, there's medical leaves. Like, we try to be accommodating for people who come to us and say, like, this is too much. We have people who work multiple jobs, or people who go to school and work, or, they have families they work. Like, everything's a lot. I mean, life's hard.
Life is really hard. And maybe it's part of that misconception that when I go to HR and I open up and I'm vulnerable about what's going on, that they're going to report it back to my manager.
Yeah.
Right?
I would never do that.
Yeah.
I mean, if they said something, that they were going to hurt themselves or something, of course I'm going to report that. But, if they're just like, I'm really stressed, money or whatever's going on, family issues, like that is not something we share.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's confidential.
Well, that's an amazing tip for you, the listener, who wrote in and kind of asked that question, because I know you were looking for a little bit of guidance, and I really appreciate you answering that so succinctly, because it's important for people to recognize that HR is a safe place, right? They can come to you, they can confide, they can get the resources that they need to be able to show up as their best self every day. So I really encourage that. So to kind of wrap up today, we've talked about the family culture of a business. We've talked about how sometimes automation and AI can create, I would say, ideal worlds, but they don't really always play and convey into all the spaces that we work in. We've also talked about how HR is a safe place for people to be able to come to and engage with. We've talked about some of the cultural narratives that you're pushing forward with your competitive ice cream machine, ice cream contest, which I absolutely love. And we're going to be implementing that, team, so don't worry about that. But what would you say to an HR leader who finds themselves in a toxic work environment where they're trying to make these types of changes that they know can have a huge impact on their employees, but maybe they feel like they don't have the support from above, or maybe they're having a lack of support and engagement from below? What are some of the tips that you would give those people?
Yeah, that's a tough situation, because I've been in the situation where, like, I'll put something out to all locations. This could be in my job now or in my current jobs, where it would go out to everybody. And this is what we're doing. This is what we're implementing. This is the due date. It could be something as simple as, a training that they have to do. We have the people who are on board, and we have the people who aren't. It's those people that are not on board that it's been, it's a challenge to get them on board with these things. Some people are just set in their ways and they don't want to try something new. I'm lucky that I have the support of our CEO. And so when these things are coming out, he's backing it up as well. So when I send something out, sometimes he'll send like a follow-up, hey team, this is what we're doing. And I think just having that reinforcement that we are all on the same side, we're all doing this, has really helped to get people on board. And eventually if you never get on board, then you probably don't still work there, unfortunately. But I think just having, reinforcing that, just having people back it up. Or sometimes I'll take like, okay, this restaurant, this general manager did this amazing thing, and share it with the others. Like, look, this is what she's doing. You guys take some tips, from what somebody else is doing. And I think that's been helpful too, because then it kind of connects them, even though they're all in different locations.
Right.
They can say, oh, this manager over here is doing this with their employees. And a lot of them kind of piggyback on that too, as far as, kind of borrowing each other's ideas. So I think that helps to get it. When you see everybody else is doing something great, you want to do that too.
Because it's that sense of community.
Yeah, you want to be like, well, I want everybody to see what I'm doing too.
Yeah. Well, today has been an absolute blessing to spend time with you. I appreciate you giving us your insights, because I know a lot of people in the HR space are dealing with tech businesses and service-based businesses, and you guys are a service-based business in the restaurant space, but your unique perspectives on kind of how the landscape is changing has been incredibly refreshing, and I appreciate you bringing your perspectives. I want to use the last couple seconds here for people to find out more about you. So if they want to learn more about, Jessica and where they can find you at, but also if they want to learn more about Grill Concepts as well, how do they find more information about you guys?
I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there. As far as the company, Grill Concepts is also on LinkedIn. The parent company is Grill Concepts. For depending on where people are located, we have public school. There's 2 in California, so 1 in Culver City, 1 in Sherman Oaks, and then 1 here in Vegas. And then we have the Daily Grill, which is in Burbank, California, and Century City, California, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Houston, Texas. Hope I'm not missing anybody. Trying to run through my list. I think that covers everybody.
Okay.
So it's on the website. If anybody wants to work there, you can apply online.
Well, this weekend, I encourage everybody to go check out Public School, because I have some other friends who are in the restaurateur space, and they talk so highly about what you guys are doing in Summerlin here in Nevada. And they're like, that is an amazing spot. So I'm really excited to listen to the podcast and listen to Jessica and give some insights, because we might be borrowing a couple of those concepts as well.
Yeah, they have a great patio that has heaters, by the way. So if anybody wants to go and check it out. And there's a really cool big Christmas tree in downtown Summerlin right now that's like as tall as the building. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool, and you get like a perfect view of it from Public School. And so they do they're doing a parade down there every weekend, I guess, until the holidays.
Okay.
And their GM there is great too.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, that's been another episode of the Hart and Hustle podcast, a specific episode in our HR Hero series. So everybody give Jessica a nice warm round of applause as we kind of wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Take it easy, guys.